Hello, this is Jaden Sancho. You're listening to Yellowwallpod podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 292 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and this week we will talk about Borussia Dortmund's 4-0 win over Bayer Leverkusen and the scoreless night in the Champions League against FC Barcelona. And later on, we will be joined by Brian Sanders from the Hey Eintracht Frankfurt podcast to, you guessed it, preview Sunday's game at the Commerzbank Arena. And to discuss all that and more, join me, Matthias Zug. Hello, Matthias.
Hello, Stefan. Greetings from sunny Aspen.
Yes, if Matthias sounds like he is connected via phone, that's because he is. He is right now on the 4G instead of, on his usual studio mic. So apologies if the sound quality isn't well, but how is the weather in Aspen?
It's sunny, 72 degrees Fahrenheit, and obviously now someone has to run a circular saw at the same time. So, everything as usual.
All right. For I hope which will be better sound quality from Berlin. He is also with me, Luca Giel. Hello, Luca. How are you doing?
Hey, Stefan. I'm doing good. How about you?
Very well myself. It's very nice to have you on here. And this episode is not sponsored by anyone. And that means we can jump straight to the action. On Saturday in the afternoon game, Borussia Dortmund, shellacked by Leverkusen 4-0. It was quite the performance, and I would say it was also an expected game because against Peter Bosch's team, Borussia Dortmund once again had fewer possession. So, Luca, do you think the 4-0 win was justified?
Maybe a goal or so too much. I'm kind of torn on the performance, and now the Barcelona game kind of overshadows it all. But they kind of ran rapid in the end, and then Leverkusen were just all over the place, which was kind of a throwback to Bosch at Dortmund, at least in the end. But overall, a good game. I think maybe one or two goals too many for Dortmund.
Yeah, I don't know if I would disagree, because Leverkusen really fell apart in the end, and you have to account for that. Matthias, same question to you. Or not same question, but this was the first game for Dortmund where they actually could unleash their counterattack. It wasn't really happening for them against either Augsburg, Köln, or Union Berlin. So this was the first time Dortmund could maybe play a little bit more on the back foot. How much did you like that?
Well, I tend to not really like playing on the back foot. I like to be the team that dictates the tempo, but it did. Leverkusen played perfectly into Dortmund's hands, played completely to their strengths. Yeah, they had a lot of possession, didn't really do much of anything with it, so who cares? It's like watching Hoffenheim play right now. So, I mean, is 4-0 maybe a little bit too much, a little flattering? I don't know. Leverkusen got punished for basically not really doing much but having the ball. And Thomas Delaney once again proved why he's the greatest player in Bundesliga history.
As we so often have so often mentioned on this podcast, of course.
We love him on here. We love him.
Yes. No, but in all seriousness, there were a couple of things that happened in both games, I would say, that usually do not work out so well for Dortmund, at least haven't in the past. But Luca, we've seen now the fullback pairing twice in a row, of Rafael Guerreiro as left back and Achraf Hakimi as right back. And I would say that actually works quite well, especially if you have Delaney and Witsel in midfield. How do you see Guerreiro playing as left back? And do you think that these two will be or should be the first pick for Favre going forward now in certain games?
You forgot to mention that it also works quite well when you have Mats Hummels playing centre back, who's playing like the best player on earth right now.
Obviously.
Only a slight...
I left it to you, Luca. I didn't forget about it.
Only slightly exaggerating that. I think I tweeted the other day that I'm happy when Favre is forced into making a good decision, and playing Guerreiro and Hakimi at the same time is definitely a good decision, because both they are probably, like, apart from Morey, who hopefully will be back from injury soon, they're the best football players we have at fullback. Piszczek, obviously great guy, but he's just getting older and older, and Nico Schulz shows that he's limited. Kind of Nagelsmann kind of covered that, but not anymore. So they're the best football players you have, at least on the offensive side. The worry obviously with Guerreiro is always how will he play defensively. And that looked pretty good against Leverkusen as well as Barcelona. So I think that's something to go forward with, that pairing. It's just there are too many it's the upside offensively is just too big to, turn that down basically.
Yeah, I would very much agree with that. Matthias, do you have a explanation why Rafael Guerreiro suddenly looks so good at left back? Do you think it's just as Luca mentioned, the factor of Mats Hummels, or do you think that would be too easy, and maybe there's some credit going to Lucien Favre for fixing that maybe a little throughout the months?
Well, I think obviously they worked maybe a little bit with him. Having Mats Hummels next to him obviously gives him a lot of cover. Also, the players ahead of him, when it's Delaney and Witze, there's a lot of cover there as well. And, I think about that match in particular, when you had Sancho on Guerreiro's side, the opposition always has to account for what to do with Sancho. So that also, indirectly at least, gives Guerreiro some cover, because they can't go all out. If there's a quick transition to Sancho, you're going to get burned every time. So I think all of that kind of plays together, and the fact that, things have kind of calmed down around him when it comes to transfers and wanting to leave. But the key thing with him will just be how long can he remain healthy, because obviously that's been an issue over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, Rafael Guerreiro already had a muscular injury this season, so as you mentioned, that's a very valid concern. But yeah, maybe shift a little bit to the right from Guerreiro and a bit forward and talk about Thomas Delaney, because I thought he was excellent in the past two games. Luca, I personally think that games against Leverkusen and Barcelona are really perfect for Thomas Delaney, but in other games I'd rather not see him on the field. However, especially against Leverkusen, it worked out pretty well. How do you think did Favre's decision influence the game for, putting Delaney on Kai Havertz too? I don't know if it was man marking, but it was a very close leash.
Yeah, hats off to Favre. I'm obviously not his biggest fan, but that was extremely smart to take basically Leverkusen's best player out of the game. We saw in the end when Havertz fouled, I think, was it Hakimi? Pretty out of pure frustration, just kicked him when he was running across the field. Basically, Delaney just took all the fun out of the game for him. And that's what he's best at. I mean, Dortmund had, 30-something% of the ball, and were chasing Leverkusen all over the pitch, and that's where Delaney excels at, and that's his best skill. Like you said, the games against Barcelona, against Leverkusen apparently now, who want to have the ball now, also maybe against Bayern, those are made for Delaney, and he's a great role player in those games. But we also saw against Union that he might not be the perfect player for those kind of games. So it's always tricky with Delaney and also with Favre, because Favre tends to just stick to the players who played the game before, and there's not much like rotation going on depending on whoever the opponent is. And that's going to be interesting going forward, even against Frankfurt now, whether Delaney stays in midfield, because you don't have like much of a reason to change it because he did so well the last few games, but he also might not fit the opponent, like he did the last two. So that's going to be interesting watching it going forward.
That being said, if we think about the Frankfurt game or going forward, and especially if you have Guerrero and Hakimi as fullbacks, and I would say two fullbacks that can bring on creativity and both can tuck to the inside, and I think both have shown that. I don't know if it was Dortmund's 2-0 or 3-0. I think it was the 3-0 that Guerrero scored himself, which he started by dribbling through the midfield. So keeping that in mind, do you think it's likelier that Favre will stick with the Delaney-Witsel double pivot because he knows there's more creativity on the fullback positions? Because the biggest problem in my book in the first games was that Dortmund's fullbacks got isolated by the opponent, and then there was no way to go through the middle. But they sort of seem to have solved that now, at least for 2 games.
Yeah, they didn't solve that. Like technically, they just put better players on there, basically.
Basically, yeah.
yeah, that's always like the X factor when you have Guerrero on there, because it has been a problem at Dortmund for like a long time, that in the first phase of the build-up game, the ball gets to the fullbacks pretty quickly, and then they don't know what to do with it because you have another defender in the touchline, and it's really easy to be like isolated out there. But Guerrero somehow often finds ways to get out of there. He also turns over the ball sometimes, and it like creates pretty dangerous situations for the opponents, but most of the time it works. And going back to your question, I think like knowing Favre, I don't think he'll change unless there's something happen we don't know about, like injury, or they're just a bit tired after the games. But I think there's 1 week off after this game, so I think he'll stick with Delaney and Witsel for now.
Yeah, I believe so too. Matthias, how did you see Mats Hummels against Leverkusen? And then also I would like to get your take on Julian Brandt against his former side.
Well, I mean, starting with the positive, Mats Hummels, it's like he never left. It's like going, I'm not quite sure why Löw decided to not let him play anymore, or Bayern let him leave. He played extremely well, dominated that match and the following match, and it seems like he's back in his old groove, with good passing, good positional play. And given how Dortmund set up against Leverkusen and then also Barcelona, it did help that they weren't pushing quite as high up. So his slightly diminished pace, which was never great, really didn't get exploited. So that was, it played to his strengths. I mean, both matches played to Dortmund's strengths, absolutely. Now, Julian Brandt was a little disappointing, and maybe it was, playing against your old team again. I thought the abuse he got from the Leverkusen supporters was extraordinarily childish. But, what are you going to say? Football fans aren't necessarily known for not being childish.
Well, Mats Hummels could attest to that after reading about 1 billion snack emojis from Borussia Dortmund fans in the past 3 years. So, not looking at anyone, Luca.
I never sent any emojis. I just made memes.
Yeah. Same thing, basically. But nevertheless, even if Julian Brandt didn't have the best game, it was enough for Dortmund to create 4 goals. I think the first one was actually quite nice and sort of typical for this game, because I thought the first half overall was quite chaotic, and I think Dortmund made the best and utilized this chaos that ensued in midfield with a lot of interceptions here and there. And it was Hakimi who intercepted the ball when Leverkusen were just trying to transition forward and pinged it right back into Alcázar, who tucked it away. That was really great. And of course, then maybe one of the best moments of Alcázar without him actually touching the ball, the 2-0 right after the break, when I think Jadon Sancho just received the ball on the right from Akanji, also another transition moment, and squared it. And Alcázar then with a really amazing dummy for Marco Reus to score. I don't know if it was his first goal, but felt like it past Radetzky. So, Matthias, I think we have to talk a little bit about Marco Reus too after this game. In the context of the Barcelona game, things already look a little bit different yet again, but how important do you think were those 2 goals finally for him in the Bundesliga?
Well, it gets him going. Obviously, confidence is a big deal for any attacking player. They're so form and confidence driven, and as such, he was able to really show why he was arguably probably the best player for Dortmund over the course of the entirety of last season. And, against Barcelona, let's just say he didn't have his greatest day. Not that luck wasn't necessarily there for him that day, but we'll get into that again in a minute. But it seemed to all click for him. And again, can't stress it enough. It's almost like Bosch forgot his time at Dortmund, like most of us try. And he forgot what the strengths are of a player like Marco Reus. And it was, I'm not going to say it was easy. No Bundesliga match is easy. But he sure made it look easy at times.
Well, the thing is, I believe that had Leverkusen actually scored one of their 2 chances they had before Dortmund made it 2-0 or 3 even, I think this game could have taken a completely different direction. We all know that goals change games, but since Leverkusen, were their usual selves away to Dortmund and choked, that didn't happen. But Luca, same question to you. Were you surprised by Peter Bosch's tactics? I mean, what was he thinking playing that way in Dortmund? Is it just his stubbornness, or why would you play with Leverkusen like you play there at the Westfalenstadion?
I mean, honestly, I don't think it was that bad. At least looking at it until the 2-0. Obviously goals not only change games, but they also change perception of the game when you watch it. But I watched it after the fact because I couldn't watch it live, so I already knew the result and could concentrate on more how the game was going. And Leverkusen controlled most of the phases. Yeah, most of the passes went that into those dangerous areas, and they passed around in the back a lot, but they had a few good chances. I think I forgot who was through on goal cleanly. Might have been Bellarabi or something. But I forgot pretty quickly after the half, and they had a few good situations. Just the last pass was missing, basically. And I don't think the setup was that bad. I'm not sure if Leverkusen can be a team that sits deep like Union does or something like that. I don't think they have the players for that. So it was worth a try, and then obviously it makes it worse that they just fell apart in the end. If it's a 2-0 loss against Dortmund, nobody really bats an eye in Dortmund. It's just the 2 goals in the end make it look worse than it actually was, I think.
Yeah, I mean, in the preview episode, we talked a little bit about the in-game coaching, and I believed then that the game would probably be decided in the second half. And I guess the result dictated the decision of Peter Bosch. He explained it himself after the game at the press conference that, it was his decision to bring on more attacking players and to, chase the result. And that opened up Leverkusen even more. And I think he tellingly said that at the end of the game, they weren't even a team anymore. It was just this incohesive from Leverkusen. So, that's pretty poor, but we've seen it so many times from Peter Bosz that it's not surprising, and Bayer Leverkusen, I guess, have shown that maybe if they want to become, win the Bundesliga or whatever, that there's still something missing individually and also tactically from that team. But I'm sure they will have a very good run for the Champions League spots. I don't know if it will be the very top, but that doesn't really matter, to us at least. It doesn't. Matthias, what do you think this win means for the Bundesliga? And also Leipzig, I think, drew 1-1 against Bayern, which was also pretty exciting and also a very high level game. Do you think that Dortmund can turn things around in the Bundesliga again after that first loss?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of football left to play. I think it shows that, Leipzig, especially in the first half against Bayern, showed that they're not as completely perfect yet as it certainly seemed in the first few matches. And Bayern is there to drop points quite often this season, I believe. It's just a matter of Leipzig, and then in particular now with Dortmund, to try to keep pace. If for a match lost, instead of replacing it with just 1 point, but you replace it with a victory, and at the same time the other guys drop points, that plays out. And it's a huge confidence boost because Leverkusen are a good side, a side that can compete for the Champions League spots, or the Champions League spot. I think there's only going to be one available for everybody else to fight over. So I think it shows just how unpredictable this season probably will be.
Yeah, that's probably right. I feel like there's going to be a lot of unforeseen stuff happening. Also, from a Dortmund perspective, the loss against Union Berlin, I don't know if you want to call it completely unforeseen, because Dortmund have lost in that sort of fashion before, but I thought they were over it, but they were not. Maybe going forward they are, who knows. But yeah, any final thoughts from that Leverkusen game, Luca? Maybe quickly, do you agree with the assessment that Jadon Sancho right now isn't playing at his very best, but still usually manages to, have to score a point or two? I think it was another 2 assists in this game.
Yeah, it's the Ousmane Bele syndrome. Basically doing the same thing, playing badly for the entire game and then still creating like 3 goals. I said after the game that Brandt basically played exactly like Sancho, but just the moments of brilliance were missing for him. And just one quick assessment on what it says about the Bundesliga. The problem with Dortmund is not the games against like the top 6 or so. The problem is the games against the bottom, I would say 5 to 10 teams. And I didn't see that much from the Leverkusen game that would encourage me in thinking we'll have a better game plan or have a better strategy than we had against Union. They still struggled on the ball whenever Leverkusen put pressure on them, or when Leverkusen set deeper. And I mean, as good as it is to just sit deep, because Leverkusen couldn't do anything with the ball, but whenever Leverkusen put pressure on them, they lost the ball basically, and the build-up play was still, not that great, except for a few situations, which luckily led to goals a few times, and then the game was decided basically. But I'm still hesitant to really go all out on the title challenge thing, because I think the games against the lesser teams who will either like do a man marking scheme really high up the pitch or just sit deep will still be a huge challenge for Dortmund under Favre.
Yeah, I agree. But I think after the last 2 games, it's really good news that at least they don't seem to struggle that severely against really good teams. Because if you also struggle against the really good teams, then you sort of struggle against everyone, and that's that would be really bad news. I mean, a couple of positives that sort of transition, because they count for both games. But I thought that for first time in a long time, Dortmund in such a game actually found a very good mix of counter pressing, when to press and when not to press. Especially, I would highlight Axel Witsel here, who sometimes pressed really high and is something that's possible because right now he is fit and wasn't possible toward the end of last season because he was so fatigued. And so that means Lucien Favre really has to find a way to give him rests every now and then, because this is very important for Dortmund to have a good counter-pressing scheme. Overall, the cohesiveness worked in those two games, but especially with Axel Witsel sometimes leading the fray, if you will, it adds a little bit, because it's much harder to play around Axel Witsel when he presses you than other players, even though he's not the fastest, but he's just very good at it. So that's a point I wanted to make real quick, because I thought if we talk about Dortmund's transition and how they scored the goals, I think their counter pressing actually plays a part in that. So there's that. And quickly, I thought Manuel Akanji had 2 good games again, and Luca, I think you tweeted that his hips were repaired or whatever to that extent.
He looks like he has hips again, yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
He had like one mistake in the Leverkusen match which led to a big chance, and one minor mistake against Barcelona, but that's a huge improvement. And obviously he also benefits from having Hummels playing like he does next to him. But it's good that he is kind of stable now and gets better and better, hopefully, with every game.
Yeah, and then lastly, I think maybe the highlight of the game that didn't happen during the game was Dortmund thanking Borussia Dortmund fans for their, vocal protests against neo-Nazis that were gathered and had a little demonstration at the Platz an der Sonne, or Sonnenplatz, which is by the Möllerbrücke. So that was very nice. Dortmund used the new OLED banners that are on the upper tier now, and sent out a little thank you message. I think it's important that you really name and shame people that way, and that the club acknowledges what's happening around them. And I thought that there was a very smart thing to do by the club, and something that we here can only encourage. So kudos to Dortmund for thanking their fellow fans in the fight against Nazis in Dortmund, which sadly is a problem. And I don't know how to transition out to the Barcelona game, but I will have to, because that's what we have to talk about next. Matthias, before we dive into the match itself, I would like you to speak a little bit about A, the atmosphere, and B, that little choreo, which was quite amazing.
Well, I mean, was it the first time Barcelona came to the Westfalenstadion, if I remember correctly? And when a club like that comes, Dortmund supporters over the last 10 or so years in particular have always risen to the occasion. And I know there was I know in retrospect that prior to the choreography going up, there's a little bit of uncertainty in the fan scene if it would come off. I'm not quite sure why exactly, but I did read that and hear about that. But obviously it worked. It impressed everybody again. The commentators were impressed. The international press once again was in awe of the atmosphere at the Westfalenstadion, which never, ever disappoints, in my opinion, especially on big occasions and against big clubs. So, Dortmund showed itself on and off the pitch from its best side this week.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I have to say, it's pretty impressive, the video that Matt Ford from Deutsche Welle tweeted from that little confetti choreo. I think has by now amassed 5 million views. So that's for social media. If you want to measure it that way, that's actually quite the feat. So that shows just how successful and how well received this choreo was. I fully agree with you, Luca. How did you like it that Dortmund fans really whistled Barcelona for almost the entire game whenever Blaugrana had the ball?
Seems to have worked, so yeah, good. Yeah, I don't know. It's probably like I would prefer it over just singing the same song every time for like 10 minutes. It's more related to the game and what's actually happening. I know a few people didn't like it, but I thought it was, a good way to basically underline the Dortmund's pressing was like a pressing with 11 players instead of, with 12 players instead of 11.
Yeah, I definitely liked it. And I mean, after the 90 minutes, I have to say I also really liked the game between the two sides. I think it was on a really high level and was very enjoyable. Obviously not not satisfying in the end, because Dortmund easily should have won this game with all the chances they had. But Matthias, let's start from the start. One change to the lineup. Thorgan Hazard played instead of Julian Brandt on the left wing. Do you think that was the correct decision by Favre?
I don't know. I mean, aside from a few moments, I'll be brutally honest, I didn't really notice Hazard that much, to be totally honest. So Brandt or Hazard, it's not the difference maker. You know, as far as giving Brandt maybe, I don't know, time to think about it, or just a rotation, which I think is always shocking when Favre does any form of rotation, especially because he didn't rotate anybody else, and I don't expect much rotation ahead of the weekend. I didn't really see much of an impact. Maybe I missed it. Maybe it was more subtle than obvious, but I don't really have a huge opinion on that, other than maybe it's just a rotational decision.
Yeah, fair enough. So let's talk about that first half, Luca. I think the first 10 to 15 minutes, Dortmund actually started out quite well, but then Barcelona took over and had a lot of possession and also created a lot of set pieces. How did you see that first half? What was good? What was not so good from either side?
Yeah, they made Barcelona look like Leverkusen for a second. I think, first of all, I think the change from Brandt to Hazard was also defensively largely, I think. Hazard is a much better defender, I would say, and a much more willing defender. That's usually the knock on Julian Brandt, so I think that was a smart change. And then the match was extremely interesting. How like a football match can, for no apparent reason whatsoever, there was no huge tactical change, nothing really changed, but it had weird phases, this game. Like you said, the first 10 to, 15 minutes, Dortmund were the better team, had a lot of the ball, looked threatening at times. Then Barcelona for some reason took over, and then before the half, Dortmund got better again. And it just, throughout the entire game, basically it changed all the time. It looked like whenever, like, I don't know, like if basketball didn't have a shot clock, something like that, one team just was on the attack for 10 minutes or so, and then the other team got the chance to attack for like 10 minutes. It was kind of weird in that way, but also thoroughly enjoyable, I would say.
Yeah, what is something that probably holds true for both teams is that they can press pretty well and also retain the ball pretty well, and that sort of interchanged. I think in the first half, you know, my biggest criticism was in the end that Dortmund's ball retention was just lacking. When Barcelona pressed them, they lost it immediately. I thought they were a bit too hasty. I actually agreed with Lucien Favre and his mantra of staying patient a little bit there, because like 20 minutes, 25 minutes in, whenever Dortmund had a turnover, they tried to immediately rush it forward, and that yielded in a loss of possession and helped Barcelona to actually keep the pressure on. So I didn't think that was the smartest way, but of course that completely changed after the break, and in the second half, Dortmund, I think for the first until the 80th minute or so, I had at least 50% possession, sometimes more, sometimes less. So that was immensely impressive. Matthias, is this for Dortmund maybe the biggest takeaway in such a game? Minus that they could have obviously won it, but just the maturity they showed.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was something that impressed me also from the Leverkusen match. That was a very mature, level-headed performance, and that definitely was the case also against Barcelona, where you can easily be overwhelmed the second Messi shows up. But thankfully, the internet showed how Messi really didn't do much, as we also tweeted out. It was... but I have to say, I'm not overly surprised. I mean, if we look back at the victory against Atletico Madrid last season at home in the Champions League, that was also a very mature performance. Way more goals, obviously, because there were some. Even though I would say Dortmund looked more comfortable in this match against Barcelona and may have deserved a few more goals versus the way it played out against Atletico last season.
Yeah, Luca, you've been a bit critical about the title race and Dortmund probably still struggling. But to me, actually, this could be the biggest factor for Dortmund, why I in the end disagree and say there might actually be a title race on the cards for Dortmund and maybe even go all the way. Because if you look at this team, you have a lot of veterans with Hummels, with Witzel, with Delaney, Reus. And I think Hazard is also not the youngest anymore. You can say the same for Alcázar, and Julian Brandt certainly also has a lot of experience already. So I feel like something that was already quite okay last season, but needs some improvement. Dortmund's got it with Hummels. I feel like they won't feel the nerves too many times this season, to be honest. I don't think the performance against Union Berlin has to replicate itself too many times. So I don't know how you see this, but I think the age factor and the maturity that Dortmund can show should be a very positive factor going forward.
Yeah, it's definitely one aspect. I'm not sure if nerves were really the problem last season. I just felt like they were just luckier in the first half of the season, and then luck kind of ran out.
Well, there were more individual mistakes in the
That's true,
especially toward the end, and I think that's down more to nerves than anything else. That
could be, yeah.
I mean, we don't know for sure. Obviously, we don't play the games, but
could also be just tiredness
or that.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a fair point, especially in Munich. I would agree on that. The problem I still see is that the problem of ball progression against teams like Union, and Hummels does help there, and we created a lot of chances there. But I would still like a guy like Gündogan or someone in midfield.
I was just going to say, I think if we talk about these sort of games and ball progression, it's probably just that Julian Weigl next to Axel Witsel is probably not the best to have there.
Or Delaney,
Yeah, you need someone with a bit more verticality. That is true, and I think it's the job of Michael Zorc to find someone who can do that.
Or play Brandt there. No.
Yeah, well, that. But so far
that might be a problem defensively. Yeah.
Yeah, but then again, against at least the minnows, you can do that. But anyway, doesn't concern us right now because we're talking about a nice game against Barcelona. So,
yeah, sorry.
Here we are. Matthias, there was sort of a duel between two German internationals, Marc-André ter Stegen against Marco Reus. Sort of the biggest fight. Why did ter Stegen edge it in the end?
Because Löw and now in retrospect, Uli Hoeneß pissed him off. Well, I mean, ter Stegen is, in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of people, probably the best German keeper right now, and over the last few seasons. But he's just really, really good, and Marco Reus is really good. And it's not like, when we think about that first really big opportunity that ter Stegen saved, it's not like Reus fluffed his lines. He played it perfectly. He played it where he had to, and ter Stegen played it perfectly and saved the way he had to. I mean, it was just two extremely good players doing exactly what they needed to do. And then even the penalty miss, obviously Reus could have shot it a little bit better because then he would have scored. But at the same time, it was a really good save. And the recovery to make sure that there was no follow-in was also really good. And then also against Paco. And I mean, numerous times, Marc-André ter Stegen showed why he should be the number one for Germany. And everything that's been happening, I think, does fuel him, does motivate him. And playing in Germany against Dortmund, he probably would have been even better if it would have been against Bayern, given who would have been on the other side. So I think, talk about strikers having, or attacking players being a bit of a head game and streaky. Keepers is even more so. And he definitely was very motivated to get it done.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you could just sense what an amazing goalkeeper Marc-André ter Stegen is. And maybe it helped that he knows Marco Reus from the past. I don't know who is favored by something like that. But yeah, Luca, how did you feel when you saw the expected goals in the end? I think it was like 3.34 to Barcelona's, 17 or so. I don't have it right in front of me, but it was actually quite negligible, the expected goals that Barcelona created from shots. And I think the only true chance I can remember was Suarez from a narrow angle going for the near post, which Bürki saved this time. And if you want maybe the chance from Messi at the very end, but that shot was obviously blocked by Thomas Delaney. So let me into your world of emotion when you discovered that expected goal chart.
It was expected. Sorry. Yeah, it's obviously not a perfect metric, but kind of replicated or kind of, showed how the game went, I would say. Barcelona had a lot of the ball, but like Leverkusen didn't create much from it. I think that's also a problem they have had not only against Dortmund, but against other teams this season. I think not few Barcelona fans want their coach out. So it's a problem they've had. So it was a smart approach not to try and have the majority of the ball against Barcelona, but to keep them to 0 point something expected goals was pretty impressive nonetheless. Even if a 16-year-old played in the beginning and Messi only played 30 minutes and was injured, that's still impressive against Barcelona. And I think a lot of it was down to Mats Hummels that was absolutely insane. Every time I looked up and the ball was cleared, it was because Mats Hummels was in the way. And I've one of the best performances I've seen him play, period. I would say one of the best matches I've seen him play.
Yeah, I would agree. Matthias, I think it's safe to say this was a world-class performance, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's right up there with, I would say, probably his first season at Bayern, obviously the World Cup season, and the last 2-3 seasons at Dortmund. I mean, he turned back the clock, showed complete dominance in the air, on the ground. His positioning was great. His anticipation, that's one of the things people, I think, underestimate with defenders, is his ability to anticipate where the opposition is going to play. And he did that so many times that he stepped forward at the right moment to intercept the pass. And it was really impressive.
Yeah, he sort of has perfected the timing to steal the ball when the attacker just is about to receive it and tries to have a first touch and turn around or whatever, exactly in that moment where the attacker doesn't really see where the defender is. Hummels is there to just snatch it, and that's just super impressive. I mean, I was pretty floored by this performance. I have to honestly say. I mean, I knew that Hummels could do that. We all know that, but it's still impressive to see it throughout the game. And I felt like I didn't really want to say anything throughout the 90 minutes, not to jinx him. But no, he actually managed to play completely mistake free for the 90 minutes. Sky, I think, said that he had 100% of the tackles, but Hummels himself said that there was maybe one instance where Suarez beat him. But yeah, I think he had 7 interceptions or so. It's just crazy. Yeah, just an amazing performance. And we have to say, you know, it's been quite consistent, actually. I don't think Hummels has been, you know, bad or subpar or anything so far this season. I thought consistently he has been always in each game one of Dortmund's best players. So yeah, it's good to see him respond to whatever is thrown at him with the performances. And today at the news conference before the Frankfurt game, Favre also said that he totally deserves to be called up for the German national team. Obviously not his call. And Michael Zorc said that he said that Mats Hummels is the best German defender when Dortmund signed him. He says it today, and he says he'll probably say it again in 2020. So yeah, just very impressive. Luca, anything else that really needs to be highlighted? I also thought Guerrero's performance was pretty good, but I feel like it was cohesively so good that it's hard to, you know, pick particular players out. I thought the only player that wasn't up to his usual self was maybe Paco Alcácer against his former side.
Yeah, there were a few layoffs that weren't great, but he also he still looks like fitter than he did last season, and that's going to be good in a few games. Yeah, and there were still a few good layoffs, and then Royce or whoever else kind of misplaced a pass here and there. The offensive players kind of fell off in comparison with the defensive 6, I would say. Because they all did great, basically. Akanji, with the first match, he didn't have like a mistake in that led to a chance. And Guerrero, basically whenever he's fit and whenever he's played, he's just an amazing footballer, and hopefully he'll extend his contract soon, and then we just have to make him eat a salad or two, and he'll be good. But yeah, the defensive 6, Witzel, Delaney, the smaller Hummels, also another amazing game from him. And then just the front 4 weren't like as great. Like Matthias said, I didn't really notice Hazard was playing. Royce, not great in front of the goal. Other than that, better than lately, but also not great. Sancho didn't really have those moments in this game, or not as many of them. And like you said, Alcacer struggled a bit. And then Brandt came on and almost scored the goal of the season. But other than that, also not that much from him.
Yeah, that sums it up quite well, actually. And then, of course, Lucien Favre only used 2 out of his 3 substitutions, bringing on Brandt and then Brun Larsen, and that means
Götze.
Yeah, this discussion about Mario Götze is just going on forever now. I don't think he has played against Union. Did he play against Cologne? I can't remember.
He played in one match, but I don't remember which one.
Well, that would be the Augsburg game then. I think the total of minutes he has gotten now is 23 out of a possible 720. So, yeah. Or no, I think 630. I don't know.
I wonder why he didn't extend his contract.
Yeah,
But
yeah, it's absolutely baffling. Now, obviously, Mario Götze right now has zero incentive to either extend his contract or do anything right now. Lucien Favre is basically, when he's asked about it, he says that last season Götze also didn't play at first, and then peu à peu played more and more until he played a lot in the end. I don't know if that would even translate to the next season, because it's a completely different setting. So yeah, but we'll see. I think it's quite sad, because in such a game, I think Götze could make a difference, especially after Royce got tired in the end. It might help to bring him on. Matthias, any final words on that game before we can move over to the Frankfurt preview?
No, I think the only thing missing was a goal, unfortunately. Inter and Slavia Prague drawing, which definitely wasn't, and nobody could really bet on. This would have been a great opportunity to create some serious room between yourself and Barcelona and Inter. So it was an opportunity missed, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would agree. So, I guess that then nicely wraps up our analysis of the Leverkusen and the Barcelona game. You both have to leave now, which means it's just going to me and Brian for the next preview. So, Matthias, thanks for coming on. Please give us your prediction for Sunday's game, and then tell listeners how to find you on Twitter.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Matthias Hug, and I think Dortmund are going to win this one 2-0.
Very well. Luca, same for you.
On Twitter at Vierdekirch. I think it'll be traditionally difficult in Frankfurt, and I will go for a 2-2 draw.
All right, that is very well. I'm actually going for a 2-1 win for Dortmund. I'm leaning myself out of the window, as we would say in German. Anywho, so again, thanks to you two for coming on, and hopefully until next week. And I will now return with Brian to discuss Frankfurt. Me and Brian Sanders from the Hey Eintracht Frankfurt podcast. Hello, Brian. How are you doing?
Hello, and welcome to the Yellowwallpod podcast, where you will suddenly hear less about BVB and more about Eintracht Frankfurt. I'm doing very well, Stefan, despite both of our results midweek in Europe. I'm still very positively minded, but then again, I am American after all.
Well, I don't know if being American and positively minded go hand in hand currently, but I'll leave that one for others to decide. So yeah, you are obviously the host of the Eintracht Frankfurt Hey Eintracht Frankfurt podcast. Before we get into it, do you mind telling our listeners how long you guys been around and where you are coming from?
Oh, yeah. So, weirdly enough, it was on this very podcast when I was interviewed by Jason Rose, a former kind of frequent member of the podcast. He interviewed me many years ago, kind of previewing Eintracht versus BVB in the same sort of setting as today. And I had actually spoken with one American-based German and one American who also had a great love of the Eintracht. And I thought, you know what? Why the heck is it that there is no podcast covering the Eintracht in English? We have a great podcast that covers the Eintracht if you speak German, which my fluency is not as good as it should be. And I said, you know what? I have always wanted to host my own show, and why not talk about the Eintracht? And so, Hey Eintracht Frankfurt was born after a couple of
So you just needed a subject to talk about. You always wanted to have a podcast.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so self-centered and everything. But yeah, I wanted to talk about the Eintracht. I wanted to make it a show for the fans, by a fan, not someone who might be, producing it from the club necessarily. And I got a couple people together. We have now created a podcast that has been out for over 100 episodes. So kudos to us therein. But yeah, we just love the Eintracht, and we have found that there are a lot of people who speak the English language exclusively that also love the Eintracht as well. So that is how Hey Eintracht Frankfurt was born, and that's the story of the only English language podcast coming to Eintracht Frankfurt.
Exciting. I'm always glad that there are more other English Bundesliga podcasts around. So for people who want to find out more about the Eintracht, can go listen there, as you just described. For now, though, we have to talk about Sunday's match. Borussia Dortmund traveled to Eintracht Frankfurt am Main, and it will be a very exciting match. I think I'm saying nothing controversial when I say that the away match at Frankfurt is one of my favorite to visit, because the Commerzbank Arena is just one of the best in the Bundesliga, and especially in recent years when since Eintracht improved a little bit, the atmosphere has improved as well, and I think the whole club just took it to another notch in the last 2-3 seasons.
I would totally agree.
I'm very excited about that, and a bit disappointed that I can't personally be there. Dortmund's record in the recent games against Frankfurt isn't the best, obviously, but
only from your point of view as a BVB fan. If you're an Eintracht fan, there's nothing but positivity to say.
Yeah, I think we can agree on that, but all that doesn't matter. It all goes out of the window because it's a whole clean slate of 90 minutes to play for. But of course, there was a lot of turmoil in the summer. Frankfurt have lost the so-called Büffelherde, which is, of course, Ante Rebic, Sebastian Aller, and Luka Jovic.
Yeah, I love to call them the three Buffaloes. Losing them, whilst tough, the rest of the Eintracht squad really has stayed intact. And yes, it is kind of hard to replace three players who are able to create such offense. You do have the rest of the club kind of. If you go player by player, everyone has been attached to the club with few exceptions since the beginning, since the middle part of the Niko Kovac era at Eintracht, not at FCB, as he now is currently at. But there's a lot of players who've been apart and know each other, and whilst a different strategy is in place under Adi Hutter, the players being familiar with themselves is, I would say, something that is now a strength for the Eintracht. Whereas, if you look at previous regimes that were leading the Eintracht, the constant change in coach, the constant change in players, there was no consistency. There was no real long-term squad togetherness, and I think that is definitely different nowadays.
Yeah, it's true. I think pretty much everyone laughed at Fredi Bobic when he came over to join Eintracht Frankfurt from VfB Stuttgart, where things weren't going well for him. But as we can safely say by now, it's more about VfB Stuttgart being an absolute disaster club than Eintracht Frankfurt, because I think he has done an amazing job and turned the club around quite significantly. And everything seems to be on very solid foundations now. So, a couple of questions before we really talk about the game. First of all, how do you think Frankfurt have managed to compensate that Buffalo herd that scored, I think, 57 out of 79 goals last season in all competitions?
Yeah, the percentage of goals scored by the three exiting players, who brought in a rather tidy sum for the Eintracht, needless to say. Well, Whilst yes, a lot of goal productivity, a lot of key actions on the pitch, because Sebastian Haller was more than just a goal scorer.
Obviously.
He was a man who really was able to bring the score, like, the man had more assists than anyone else on the pitch, and is something that the Eintracht will kind of smart from losing. But Adi Hutter and Freddie Bobic have both kind of come to the understanding that, hey, look, the Eintracht, when you don't qualify for the Champions League, which could possibly keep one, if not two, of the three Buffaloes together, you have to be able to be flexible in terms of changing your style of play. So Paciencia is a Eintracht striker who has been playing now a year under the Hutter regime, and actually has been performing quite well and has been able to be a great facilitator. Add him with Bastos, who's just been added on, and you have a striker who is able to get goals. You put him in the right spot, and goals will come. Whilst not exactly like-for-like replacements, I would say that the Eintracht is in a good position to allow themselves, especially with playing in a much easier Europa League campaign, to be able to kind of develop the squad to kind of push onwards and upwards, as they say.
I personally think that the additions, especially at the forward positions, have been really, really savvy. Obviously, it doesn't gel right away. I think that's a given, but it's a very strong side, and we have seen in the recent games that Eintracht A still play a very energetic and intense brand, and B create a lot of chances. Maybe they don't finish them that well yet, but I think the precision that's required will come with time, and the timing will only improve. So I'm not really concerned about Eintracht Frankfurt. Obviously, Frankfurt also added Sebastian Rode from Dortmund, which, was already a very well working loan last season. And Rode is back at his best, I would say. So it's really good. Quickly, I mean, we've already talked about it a bit last season with Bastian Roth from the Eintracht Frankfurt podcast, but that was very early in the beginning, very early in the season. Sorry, I'm a little bit distracted right now because the Patriots just released Antonio Brown.
Not that we didn't see, but not that us as gentlemen based in the United States did not see that coming, but, you know.
Yeah.
Happens.
Still very interesting. Anyway, back to Adi Hütter. I wanted to ask you how he has turned Frankfurt, I don't want to say around, but I still think there was an evolution under him, and I personally liked it better than what Niko Kovac did at Frankfurt.
Indeed. So Niko Kovac, to kind of go to what he was able to utilize, he was very much a more hard-nosed, hard-playing, exemplifies more what kind of a player that he was, but he was never able to make Rebic, Alea, and Jovic click all at once. What Hutter was able to do, and something that you could see from the young boy squad that has come after him, he was there for quite a few years, consistently finishing second before he got into the promised land of the Swiss title, of which his successor, I'm not sure who that was, has been able to repeat. He played a very attacking style, able to utilize the assets that he had, and kind of realize, hey, you know what? I want to play in a free-flowing attacking style. I don't have the assets to be able to do that in the kind of players that he had on hand, and he was able to adapt to what he had. Case in point is the beginning of the Eintracht season last year, whereas Eintracht was able to pick up a win against Freiburg, and then the next three matches in the Bundesliga, in addition to the Pokal, Eintracht had 4 losses. And then as the matches came along, he was able to get his message across to the players, and they were able to execute his attacking philosophy that made Eintracht such an attractive team to watch, even if you are Bundesliga neutral, which I am obviously not.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like to tune in when Eintracht Frankfurt plays because, something will happen either in one or the other direction. Sadly, yesterday it didn't work out so well for Frankfurt because they lost 3-0 to Arsenal.
If you watch the match, we did not look as bad as the scoreline exemplified. And if you really want to watch the most positive things from the Eintracht Arsenal match, just watch the pre-match choreography. You can't get much better than that.
Yeah, I sadly missed it, and I still have to see it. But usually Frankfurt choreography tifos are amazing, so looking forward to taking a look rather sooner than later. But in the Bundesliga, Frankfurt have now been not on such a great run. They have lost against RB Leipzig, then beat Fortuna Düsseldorf, and then lost again to FC Augsburg, a team that other teams have beaten quite significantly so far this season, at least on the first match day. So can you maybe talk a little bit about Frankfurt's form and what their struggles are and what is already going well for them?
Happy to. I should put a little tiny caveat out there. Leipzig is not an easy team to play against, and if anyone watched Leipzig versus München at the last weekend, you kind of got to see two teams, really top-end teams, kind of going at it. And Eintracht really just played up against Timo Werner. There was not, and that's kind of how that result went, and that boy has been on fire, needless to say. The loss to FC Augsburg, there was a lot of rotation in the squad and the lead up to the Arsenal match, wanting to kind of, for the home fans in such a kind of high profile sort of match, you definitely wanted to kind of put your best foot forward in terms of Europa League group. Well, that didn't actually pan out as planned. But if you look at the way that Eintracht had played, if you watch the match, one goal for Augsburg was just just a great goal by Niederlechner, and you're not going to find much better goals over the course of the Bundesliga season other than that. Take that away, okay, you have a 1-1 result, and Eintracht had more possession, vastly more shots. Eintracht was piling on the heat. They just were unable to execute there in the first half. They got a goal in the second half. I'm not really as disappointed by that because Augsburg is this eternal, bogey team that always happens when these two teams meet. It almost doesn't matter what sort of form anyone is in. The book goes out the window, and Augsburg typically wins.
Yeah, I know that sort of feeling. Dortmund have also these boogie teams. I think actually Frankfurt away has been one of these fixtures, if we're completely honest, for Dortmund, that wasn't going all too well. Are there any significant injuries right now that Frankfurt have?
There's tiny little niggles that are here and there. Fedor Kostic was very questionable kind of injury concern when it was in the lead up to the Arsenal match. He seemed to get through the match just fine. One of the most exciting players that has been on the pitch so far in this Eintracht season. For me, I think it's more of a question of how the team kind of lays out, considering the fact that they had such a high-octane sort of match, kind of like BVB's at midweek. Both teams coming off a European excursion, and it's not necessarily the injuries that are a concern, unlike other teams in the Bundesliga who BVB has yet to play against.
Yeah, it might just be that this game starts very slow and very sloppily, just because both teams had this European game, and especially for Frankfurt, it's going to be a bit more difficult because Dortmund actually had 2 days more rest. For the Dortmund fans, obviously, I should mention that Jadon Sancho, who left the Westfalenstadion limping after the game on Tuesday, will be fit to play. Lukas Piszczek is also, not 100% declared fit yet, but Favre was at least positive, while Nico Schulz is still out with a partly torn tarsal ligament. And Matteo Morey, the other right back, is also still not entirely fit after his dislocated shoulder injury is keeping him out for about 2 months or so, but he at least returned to team training this week. But I think he got injured in a friendly against St. Gallen, which means he has missed a couple of months. And so, he won't be back all too quickly, but I also don't expect him in the squad right now anyway. So all that being said, we can probably expect Dortmund to play with a similar lineup that played against Barcelona, just because Favre doesn't have the need to rotate with no midweek's fixture after Sunday. So, I would expect maybe Julian Brandt to be back in the starting lineup if necessary. I don't know about that, but this is basically what Dortmund fans can expect. A very similar lineup with Guerrero and Hakimi as the fullbacks again, Hummels, Akanji in the middle, and then I assume it's going to be Delaney again next to Witzel, just because Dortmund will need that muscle in midfield, because we all know that Eintracht Frankfurt have a lot of strong players in the middle of the park, and you will have to counter that, and I don't have the confidence right now in Julian Weigl to do that comfortably, especially when things get a little bit messy. So I like to have Delaney in there, and I assume Lucien Favre would do the same. So that's what I expect from the game. Do you think Frankfurt will be a lot on the back foot, or do you think this will be more of a helter-skelter chaotic game?
I think it's going to be a game of let's put it this way. The first 10 minutes, no team will be able to really they'll be poking and probing going on in the first 10 minutes. I think that the Eintracht will then look to see one of three things. If BVB is looking to exploit with speedy wingers, Eintracht will just get more compact, draw the team in, and just say, okay, try and puncture us. We know one thing that we have speed of our own in the attacking third that can then be just thrown out there. I'm thinking specifically of Gacinovic, who would be able to, with his own pace, be able to run straight right back at the BVB defense. And then you have the likes of maybe Bastos being kept for the second half, playing off of the bench. You got Daichi Kamada, who, after a year spent in Belgium, has really turned into a fantastic player. I would say he is probably one of the more unknowns for most BVB fans who have followed the Eintracht just a tiny bit. And Paciencia was a big frame, but also pretty good passing skills. The Eintracht will be definitely, after 10 minutes in, be going into a full open and flowing sort of attack. Primarily when it does come down to our wing play, which we can kind of attack you guys right back at you. Da Costa will be a man utilized. It's a question of whether they'll have Kostic or Chandler on the left. But Eintracht will be able to go toe-to-toe, almost like as though it's an old-fashioned heavyweight boxing match, and it's going to be more of a question of which attacking team's defense is the one that is best able to, as they say, hold firm.
Yeah, it's pretty well put. I think there will be a lot of danger coming on both or on all four wings, if you want to put it this way. Especially with Guerrero and Hakimi, who are not the best defensively, or rather, just put it this way, just have more focus on the attack right now. So, that's how it's going to look. I assume that Dortmund will be a little bit better going through the middle. Although, as you just mentioned, Kamada is a player that is really at home in the half space and can do a lot of things work there. However, I feel like his final product, the final pass from Kamada, is not as good as it needs to be to create more chances. So, we'll have to wait and see how he does against Dortmund. And of course, I'm looking at Marco Reus always when Dortmund play against Frankfurt, because he usually has a very good game against them.
Marco Reus, there's few players that I am scared of more in terms of the Bundesliga out there. One thing that I am becoming more and more scared of is Jadon Sancho, but the fact of the matter is, I do believe in this, that the Eintracht do have their stylish wingbacks that might be able to, now they're not the most defensively minded at times, but they do have the speed and technical nous to be able to realize, okay, I need to play off an extra foot back to be able to make sure that I neutralize Jadon Sancho and his abilities. When he does, when that boy does have a little bit of space, he will take that inch and make a whole bunch more room. And unless you are a good defender and have the speed to counter, he can open up space. And we've already seen that multiple times this year.
Yeah, definitely. Especially, I assume Sancho will go up against Hinteregger, who has been very prolific recently.
Oh, he'll just knock. If those two go up against each other, what's more than likely going to happen is Jadon Sancho bumps up against the Hinty, and Jadon will just fall on his bum and just wonder what just happened because he ran into a brick wall.
Yeah, that's something that happened to Christian Pulisic quite frequently over the previous seasons, not only against Hinteregger but in general against Frankfurt. I always have this image of Pulisic sitting down and raising his arms in frustration against Frankfurt. So this is something Dortmund fans have to look out for, and especially Jadon Sancho, who I think hasn't played too well recently, even though he has at least provided a lot of assists and also goals. So even if he has a bad game, that's I guess upside about Jadon Sancho he can provide, as we already discussed in the previous part. I have one question, however. Do you think that Dominic Kor will play again, or do you think that he will be replaced by Sebastian Rode?
For me, actually, I think it is going to be Gelson Fernandes who would actually replace Kor. I think that Kor needs to cool off after kind of showing him out. Let's put it this way. He had a little bit of fire underneath him, and I usually don't mind that so long as you are responsible for your actions. And I think that he just needs to sit down on the bench, stay there for at least one more match so that he can think clearly, because all he has to do is just rewatch that, and it was so painfully obvious that he was just being played during the entire match versus Arsenal, and guess what? He's now suspended for the next Europa League match because of it. So,
yeah, I'm not the biggest Dominic Kor fan, if I'm brutally honest. I don't know why Frankfurt needed to sign him. I would have opted for another player, but maybe he still has a good game against Dortmund if he plays. I don't know. I think he had a couple of good games before against them for some reason unbeknownst to me, so who knows. Anywho, I'm pretty much out of things to say. I also don't want to drag it out artificially. If you have any more thoughts on this game on Sunday, please be my guest. You can ramble as long as you want, but if not, we can also wrap it up.
Well, then, closing thoughts from me when it does come to Eintracht Frankfurt versus BVB. If anyone has any hesitations on, do I want to watch this? Do I want to watch it on replay? Go out to your local pub, watch this with some BVB friends, or even make some Eintracht friends, because we are actually very friendly if you really bother to get to know us. Look, this is going to be an end-to-end match that a neutral always can look forward to, because if there's anything that exemplifies what the Bundesliga is, it's all out, free-flowing, attacking football. That's exactly what you're going to have here. And to put my prediction out there, because I know that is your next question, aside from where you can follow Hey Eintracht Frankfurt podcast on Twitter, that would have to be a 2-1 victory for the Eintracht. But then again, I'm a person of a positive nature.
Yeah, I predicted a 2-1 win for Dortmund earlier. But yeah, since you already know the drill, I can now lean back and you can do the rest of the talking.
Yes. For anyone who wants to follow me, you can follow my writings. I write weekly wrap up of the Bundesliga for Prost America, ProstAmerika.com. My weekly kind of roundup of the Bundesliga can be found there. But primarily, talking about the Eintracht, you can follow the Hey Eintracht Frankfurt podcast, that is at HEF Pod on Twitter. And of course, we got links to our Facebook, and of course links to our SoundCloud account that has all the most recent episodes of the podcast, now over 100 episodes strong.
Woo! Yeah, that's amazing. Nice to have that such momentum going. How many years?
It is now 2.5 years. Two DFB Pokal finals, one of which didn't turn out so well. The other one did. I wonder who that one was against and the other one was against. Just kind of wondering out loud. But yeah, it's been a great run, and we hope to do more and more over the upcoming years. We love talking to other people in the Bundesliga, of which you can also find Stefan on the latest episode of Hey Eintracht Frankfurt. So come have a listen to that.
Yes, I will now make the transition to the Eintracht Frankfurt podcast and will be the guest. So if you really feel like listening to me for another half hour or hour or however long it's going to be, feel free. I would recommend everyone to tune in anyway, just because I assume there will be even more knowledge dropped on Eintracht Frankfurt, something you will definitely not ever get enough of. So yeah, Brian.
And most importantly, beer recommendations, should you be in need for your next great beer to sample.
All right. Yes, that's of course, as always, the most important thing. Anywho, Brian, thanks for coming on. It was a blast. I hope the game will be too. And I hope I can edit out the fire trucks and ambulances as good as possible. If people still have heard something from it, my bad. But yeah.
No worries.
Anyway,
no worries.
That's all from us for this week. You can find me on Twitter at Stefan Butzko. If you want to get in touch with the entire Yellowwallpod crew, use the Twitter handle and Facebook handle at Yellowwallpod. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, now also on Spotify. And another announcement for everyone out there, of course, YouTube also is new. And please, if you're wondering why your podcast isn't updating in your regular podcatcher, if you use it via Android, that's because I've updated it. So please do it yourself. You can find the RSS feed on our homepage, which is theyellowwall.net. And if you want to have access to our written content, go there, and then you can find all the ways to put in $1 for the Patreon subscription a month, where you can then read all the news, interviews, press conferences, and stuff like that, and a couple of features here and there. So that would be very much appreciated. Anywho, as always, everyone out there, thank you for listening. Until next week, goodbye.